Hi YouTube, this is Peter, and I'm going to be talking about another Diablo 4 build. This time we're going to be talking about my Season 2 Necromancer build, which I call the Overspear Necromancer. And I have actually used this build to take down Oberlilith fairly quickly, under 2 minutes, which I have posted a previous video with that happening. So we're going to be going over the main objectives of this build, how this build is structured, and what is the idea behind it. Then we're going to be talking about the skills, aspects, and vampiric powers, because this is a Season 2 build, so we have the vampiric powers mechanic, the Book of the Dead, gear, Paragon board, stats. Then we're going to go over the gameplay, possible modifications to this build, and some of its weak points, which, like every build, it inevitably does have. So jumping straight in, this build I call the Overspear Necromancer, or Overspear Necro, and Overspear is actually a combination of Bone Spear and Overpower. Because the idea for this build came to me when I actually saw this item, which is a new unique item for Season 2 of Diablo. It's called the Banished Lord's Talisman, and what this does is it actually makes any core skill overpower when you spend 300 of your primary resource, so essence, for the Necromancer. And I thought, well, maybe I could do some kind of cool build with a skill that doesn't overpower in the vanilla game, but now I could make it overpower and do a lot of damage with that. And well, naturally, one of the first things I thought about is Bone Spear. I saw a lot of people playing Bone Spear Necro. It was a very popular build, particularly in Season 1 of Diablo 4, and it kinda still is. So I thought, yeah, a Bone Spear Necro that has all of the critical strike buffs combined with the buffs to overpower, that could make for a build that does a ton of damage. And as it turned out, it does. So for the objectives, of course, we are going to be utilizing Bone Spear to maximum effect, including all of the buffs that are provided for a Bone Spear Necro. Then we are going to also be wearing, of course, the Banished Lord's Talisman, which is going to make our Bone Spear overpower, and all of the benefits that go with that. Specifically the Paragon board and also my gear affixes are structured in a way to take as much advantage as possible around both the overpower and critical strike damage buffs. So the way I'm going to be doing a lot of damage is by doing combined critical strikes with overpowering attacks. And all of the buffs that go with those too. So there's no real backstory for this build, because this is a purely technical build. It's not a role-playing build. So let's just go straight to the skills, aspects, and powers. So in terms of core skills first, so the skills that we're primarily going to be using, this is of course going to be Bone Spear. This is a core skill, so it's going to use up essence. So we're going to be needing a lot of essence generation and regeneration to be able to afford all the essence that Bone Spear goes into. And also one thing worth mentioning is that we are not going to be taking any resource cost reduction buffs. And the reason for this is very simple. Because the way that the Banished Lord's Talisman works is your next core skill overpowers after you have spent 300 essence. So what we want to do is we want to spend 300 essence as soon as possible, so that we can have our next overpowering attack happen as soon as possible. So if we reduce the cost of our Bone Spear, that actually means that we're not going to be overpowering as often. So here the idea is to be spending a lot of essence and also be generating a lot of essence instead of reducing the essence cost of Bone Spear. So We're of course going to be enhancing Bone Spear with enhanced Bone Spear that makes Bone Spear break into the free splinters, and then we are also going to take Supernatural Bone Spear, which is going to make the first enemy hit vulnerable for 3 seconds. And in terms of aspects, we are going to be taking the Splintering aspect. This aspect will make the subsequent enemies hit with Bone Spear, because Bone Spear pierces naturally. So the enemies hit after the first are going to be vulnerable for 2 seconds, and then we're also going to be doing more damage to them. So this aspect combined with Supernatural Bone Spear basically means that our Bone Spear is going to make all enemies hit vulnerable, full stop. Yeah. So in terms of aspects also, no, that's actually the only core aspect that we're going to take that is going to be enhancing Bone Spear directly, the Splintering aspect. And also the other ways that we're going to be enhancing Bone Spear is the unique aspect of Deathless Visage, which makes Bone Spear leave behind echoes that explode. That's also additional damage that's going to happen after Bone Spear has flown by, which is of course good. And then the other way that we're going to be enhancing Bone Spear, as I've said already, is Banished Lord's Talisman, which is going to make it overpowered. For the other core skill that we're going to be using, that's going to be, of course, the best ultimate skill for the Necromancer, namely Bone Storm. We're going to be using Bone Storm mainly because of the not only because it does damage and it is a bone skill, so all of the buffs to bone skills are going to be affecting Bone Storm, but mainly because of the modifiers that it has, which are really excellent, namely Prime Bone Storm, which gives us a 15% damage reduction, and then Supreme Bone Storm, which gives us 20% critical strike chance. So that is going to make our Bone Spear hit critically a lot more than it would have done otherwise. In terms of the enhancements to Bone Storm, we are going to take aspect of the Osseous Gale. That's going to prolong the duration of our Bone Storm by up to 10 seconds, depending on the roll. And it's what's very important also, it is also going to make Bone Storm consume corpses. Because we're not using corpse explosion in this build, so we need some way to consume corpses in order to be able to generate essence with Grim Harvest when a corpse is consumed. So Osseous Gale is going to, aspect of the Osseous Gale is going to do that for us. And then the other aspect is also, of course, aspect of the Shielding Storm that is going to give us a 5% of barrier per Bone Storm hit without an upper cap. So that's going to be our main source of survivability. And then the last way which we're going to be enhancing Bone Storm is Lidless Wall. This is a unique shield that basically spawns another Bone Storm when hitting an enemy that is not affected by any of your current Bone Storms. And all of those additional Bone Storms are going to be also generating the barrier because of the Shielding Storm aspect. And then they're also going to be generating essence because of the Osseous Gale aspect and the Grim Harvest passive skill. So that's also very important for this build, and we're going to be talking about that more shortly. And of course, the key passive that we're going to take is Ossified Essence, that is going to enhance the damage of our bone skills with, and also the critical strike damage, but we'll get to that, of our bone skills, the more essence that we have. So we also want to have as much essence as possible, which kind of plays in perfectly into Bone Spear and Banished Lord's Talisman, because the more essence we have, the more essence we can spend, and the more essence we can regenerate, which will make us overpower faster in turn. Yes, so now we'll go over the different skills by some categories that I've roughly defined based on what they actually do for this build. And the first group of skills, aspects, and powers that we're going to be talking about is resource generation. So the way that we are going to be generating our resource, which we need a lot of course, for this build. First of all, bone splinters. So that's going to be your kind of last resort when all of the other ways of generating essence fails. Then you just revert back to bone splinters and use them to generate essence, because they are a generator skill. So each cast of bone splinters is going to generate 7 essence for us. Next, we have unliving energy. This is going to be 3 ranks here. This is going to be increasing our maximum essence by 9. And yeah, also bone splinters, only 1 rank here. And this is because we don't actually want bone splinters to do damage. That's not the purpose of having this skill. The purpose of doing damage is bone spear. But we only want bone splinters for the purpose of generating essence when all other sources of essence generation fail. So yeah, unliving energy, maximum essence increased by 9. Moving on, we are going to be taking 3 ranks of Grim Harvest. And what this does is it generates essence per consumed corpse. And as I said before, we are not taking Corpse Explosion in this build, and we also don't have minions. So there's only one other way to consume corpses for Necro, and this is aspect of the Osseous Gale, which basically makes Bone Storm consume corpses. And this is exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be using Lidless Wall with aspect of the Osseous Gale, so that all the Bone Storms that we generate are going to be consuming corpses all over the place, and in turn those consumed corpses are going to be generating 6 essence each. Moving on, we are also going to be using Enhanced Iron Maiden and Enhanced Iron Maiden. And what this does is, first of all, it makes Iron Maiden cost 0 essence, which is always nice. And it has another important advantage, which I will be talking about in the gameplay section. But apart from that, it also makes Iron Maiden actually generate 5 essence for each enemy cursed. So every time you're running out of essence and you see a large group of enemies, which is going to happen a lot in high level dungeons in the end game, just hit them with Iron Maiden, and then each of them is going to generate 5 essence for you. So that's a very quick way to fill up your essence bar when you're running low. And the last means of essence generation is going to be an aspect. This is actually called Aspect of Torment. And what this does is critical strikes with bond skills increase your essence regeneration by 170%. So you're going to be generating twice the essence for 4 seconds every time you critically strike with a bone skill. And since we're going to be using bone skills a lot, we're going to be using Bone Spear, and we're going to be using Bone Storm, which actually Bone Storm not only gives us 20% more chance to critically strike, but it also does a lot of hits. And Bone Storm is not damage over time, which means that it can actually critically hit. So we are going to be critically hitting all of the time because of this. And because of that, we are going to be boosting our essence regeneration by 170%, basically all of the time. So that's it for resource generation. The next category that we're going to be talking about is cooldown reduction. So the way that we're going to be reducing our cooldowns, first of all, is Enhanced Blood Mist. Since we're going to be overpowering a lot, then Enhanced Blood Mist reduces the cooldown of your Blood Mist by 2 seconds for each overpowering attack, which is a very nice thing to have. You can trigger Blood Mist more often because of this, and so that kind of makes you enables you to get out of a sticky situation more often, which will happen in the end game in high level dungeons or during boss fights or such. Next thing in terms of cooldown reduction is Abhor and Decrepify. This is an enhancement to the Gripify, and it's really great. One of the best enhancements for Necro. What this does is enemies hit while afflicted with the Gripify have up to a 15% chance to reduce your active cooldowns by 1 second. So every time an enemy is affected by the Gripify, you actually have a 15% chance to reduce your cooldown, one of your cooldowns by 1 second just by hitting that enemy. And when there are a lot of enemies in the end game, this really stacks up and it really makes you recover Bone Storm, recover Blood Mist, or anything else that you might have on cooldown super quickly. So just spam the Gripify while you're running around. What this is going to do is going to spend essence, which is good because it's going to make you overpower more often with Banished Lord's Talisman. And it's also going to reduce your cooldowns, apart from slowing down enemies and making them do less damage. Yeah. So, then... what else? Rapid ossification. This one's also really important. So every 100 essence you spend reduces the cooldowns of one of your bone skills by 1.5 seconds. And as it turns out, Bone Storm is a bone skill, so every 100 essence we spend, which is going to happen often because, as I mentioned, we want to be spending a lot of essence and also regenerating a lot of essence, then the cooldown of Bone Storm is going to be reduced by 1.5 seconds, which is very nice. And then one additional aspect that we're going to be using for cooldown reduction aspect of the Osseous Gale, as I mentioned before. This doesn't really reduce the cooldowns per se, but what it does is it actually makes Bone Storm last longer, for 8 seconds longer. So that also means that the cooldown of Bone Storm is going to be shorter, because that means we have, in this case, 8 seconds more before Bone Storm is no longer active, and we need to wait for the cooldown to make it active again. So that's why I've also put this aspect in the cooldown reduction category. And last of all, there's one other vampiric power that we're going to be using in terms of cooldown reduction, and that is Hectic. What this is going to do is, for every 5 basic skills cast, one of your active cooldowns is reduced by 2 seconds. And this is great because actually, particularly during boss fights, because we're going to be using Bone Splinters to regenerate our essence during boss fights, because there's not really that much enemies to hit with Iron Maiden. And every time we cast Bone Splinters 5 times, that's going to be reducing the cooldown of our Bone Storm. Or Blood Mist by 2 seconds, which is excellent, actually, because we need those skills to be active as often as possible. Alright, next category is going to be survivability. So the way that we're going to be boosting our survivability, first of all, is of course Blood Mist, your ultimate get out of jail free card. What this does is it makes you immune to basically everything for 3 seconds. You can't be hit, you can't be targeted, you can't be hurt with damage over time. It makes you invulnerable. So every time you're in a sticky situation, you just trigger Blood Mist, and then you have 3 seconds to get out of there, which really does wonders for your survivability. I can't really tell how many times this saved me from dying. Yes, so apart from that, as I said before, enhanced Blood Mist, when we overpower, the cooldown is going to be reduced by 2 seconds, and that helps the survivability. Also because we can trigger Blood Mist more often. Then we are also going to be taking Death's Embrace, which makes us do more damage to close enemies, but what's important here is it's actually going to make us do 9% less damage, take 9% less damage from close enemies. So you might be thinking, well, but why are you taking this skill? You're basically fighting from far away with Bone Spear, right? You're a ranged character. And the answer is yes, that is true. However, in the end game, when you're playing on a high level, enemies will eventually reach you just because of how many enemies there are. So when that happens, you want them to be doing 9% damage less to you, just so that you can reposition or basically not die. Right, so that's Death's Embrace. Next thing, Necrotic Carpus. This is going to be fortifying us for 4% of our maximum life each time a corpse is formed. And this is important. Fortifying is very important for Necromancer because it both enhances your attack power, so your damage, and your survivability. When you're fortified, you get a 10% damage reduction out of the gate, and then you can amplify that further with affixes or the Paragon board. And then also there are affixes and Paragon nodes to enhance your damage while you are fortified. So that's always a nice thing to have. 2 ranks here. I could have gone for free, but I've decided to spend that point in other more important skills, in my opinion. So that's that. Next, standalone. Also very important since we're not going to be taking minions. And that means we're basically getting 80% damage reduction since we're not having any minions, which is always very good to have. And then aspect of the... no. Before we go into the aspects, first we're going to be talking about Prime Bone Storm. As I said before in the core skills section, whenever Bone Storm is active, your damage reduction is increased by 15%. So that's actually quite a lot. And because of the lidless wall shield that we're going to be using, we're going to have Bone Storm active all of the time. What we want to happen is for basically Bone Storm to be always active when we're playing through the game. So yeah, 50% damage reduction, and we're also going to be enhancing our survivability with an aspect. That is, of course, kind of the main event when it comes to survivability, aspect of the Shielding Storm. So each time Bone Storm damages an enemy, gain a barrier equal to 5% of your base life. And since, because of Lidless Wall, we are going to have multiple Bone Storms, and because of the cooldown reduction, Bone Storm is always going to be active when we're playing. Then it's going to be all of those Bone Storms that are always active are going to be hitting enemies a lot, and that means we are getting a lot of barrier because there is no upper limit here. We just get 5% of barrier per hit, full stop. Right. And then there's also 2 vampiric powers that we are going to be using for survivability, and these powers are Sanguine Brace. When you kill an enemy, fortify for 6% of your base life. And so this is going to be both enhancing our survivability. This is our second source of fortify, but it's also very important for our damage. First thing, because when we have more fortify than half of our maximum life, we get 8% critical strike chance, so that's always good. And also, the way that overpower works is overpower does more damage the more fortify you have. So it's good to have these 2 sources of fortify so that you can be fully fortified all of the time, so that you can benefit from the maximum damage bonus to your overpowering attacks. And the second way, second vampiric power that enhances my survivability is Resilience. This one's pretty straightforward. Gain 1% damage reduction for each 2% life you are missing. So that means if you're missing 20% life, you get 20% damage reduction. Basically, the less life you have, the less damage you take. So that's always nice, particularly if you're in a tricky situation. So that's it in terms of survivability. Next category we're going to be talking about is crowd control. And our only source of crowd control really is going to be the Crepify. And what this does is it slows enemies down for a fixed percent, and also reduces the damage that they do to you for a certain percent. So that also helps your survivability. But also, what you want to take is enhanced Gravekeeper, not only because it's required for abhorrent Gravekeeper, but also because when you're hitting enemies with the Gravekeeper, you have a 10% chance to stun them for 2 seconds. So that's kind of a good way to prevent enemies from reaching you, since you don't want that to happen very often. You want to be hitting them with Bone Spear from far away as much as possible. Yeah, so that's it for crowd control. And last, and maybe the most extensive category that I'm going to be talking about is boosting the damage of this character. So first way we're going to be boosting the damage is enhanced bone splinters. This one's only needed really for boss fights, but it's really great. What it does is bone splinters have a 25% chance to fire 2 additional projectiles if cast while you have 50 or more essence. So the reason why I'm taking this is, well, first of all, because you need to have 2 points put into basic skills so that you can unlock core skills. So I needed to put something here. But also enhanced bone splinters is really great because the 2 additional splinters basically makes your bone splinters hit like a shotgun. So you basically want to get close and personal to the enemy to be hitting just one enemy with all 3 or 5 bone splinters, hopefully 5. Why? Because that means more damage to the enemy, that's one thing, and the other thing, it means more hits, and more hits mean more lucky hits, they mean more critical hits, and that's going to that's going to make all the buffs that come from lucky hits and critical hits trigger more often. So that's also a cool mechanic to have. Next way to enhance the damage, as I said in the beginning, is the enhancements to Bone Spear. That's going to be enhanced Bone Spear, where it breaks into 3 shards and then kind of comes back and to deal more damage to the enemies, and Supernatural Bone Spear, which is going to make enemies vulnerable. And enemies that are vulnerable take 20% increased damage right out the gate, and you can further enhance that with Paragons or with affixes, which we are going to be doing, as you'll see in a moment. Next, imperfectly balanced. This one's also very important for this build. Your core skills cost 9% more essence but deal 15% more damage. And of course the simple one is they deal 15% increased damage, but also actually the other effect, they cost 9% more essence. Seems like a downside, but actually for this build this is beneficial, because as I said in the beginning, the way Banished Lord works is you overpower when you spend 300 essence. So it's actually a good thing that our core skills are going to be costing more essence, because that's going to make us hit the 300 resource more often, and in turn that's going to make us overpower more often. So that's kind of maybe not very straightforward, but it works very good for this build, actually. Next up, Iron Maiden. I'm mostly taking Iron Maiden for the enhancement that makes me generate essence, but Iron Maiden does make enemies take damage when they deal the direct damage when they are affected, so that's always some nice chip damage to have. Next thing, amplify damage, and this is the other reason why you want to be cursing enemies. Because you basically want, when enemies are cursed with and you have ranks in amplified damage, you're going to be doing 20% increased damage to those enemies. So when you're running around, when you're either hitting them with the Gravekeeper to reduce your cooldowns, or with Iron Maiden to regenerate your essence, you're also going to be doing more damage to them, which is excellent, which is what you want. Then Death's Embrace, 6 damage more to close enemies, always good. Death's Reach, 12% increased damage to distant enemies, also very nice. Then we're going to be moving over to the bone specific skills. Serration, your bone skills have 0.9 increased critical strike chance for each 30 essence you have upon cast. So when we have a lot of essence, we have a lot more crit chance with bone skills. And that goes for both Bone Spear and Bone Storm, which is really desired. Compound Fracture. After critically striking 10 times with bone skills, your bone skills deal 15% increased damage. So we are going to be using bone skills all of the time, and we're going to be critically striking with bone skills all of the time, because we're going to have a lot of crit from Serration. We're going to have a lot of crit from Bone Storm, Supreme Bone Storm. So we're going to have the 15% damage boost basically always as well. And Evulsion, your bone skills deals 15% increased damage to vulnerable targets. And since Bone Spear is going to be making both the first enemy hit vulnerable and then the subsequent enemies hit vulnerable as well because of the aspect that we have, then all of those enemies are going to be getting 15% increased critical strike damage, which is good. Right. Then we will be moving over to the splintering aspect. Yeah, I've just talked about this. It makes the subsequent enemies, so enemies after the first hit with Bone Spear vulnerable, which is going to make us do more damage to them. What else? Aspect of Serration. Let's see. Yeah, so this one is also very important. The Ossified Essence key passive, which we have, also increases the critical strike damage of your bone skills by 1% per essence above 50. So the more essence you have, not only the more damage are you going to do, that is provided by Ossified Essence right out the gate, but when you have this aspect, you're also going to be doing more critical strike damage, up to 40%, depending on the role. And then there is also 2 vampiric powers that we're going to be using to enhance our damage. First one is Prey on the Weak. You deal 16% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. That's kind of straightforward. And then the other, maybe more important one is Blood Boil. And what this is going to do is, apart from spawning the blood drops, those are maybe a fair bit of chip damage to handle, like the little guys around you, but more importantly, every 20 seconds your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. So not only is Bone Spear going to overpower when we hit 300 essence, but it's also going to be overpowering every 20 seconds, and that's kind of exactly what we want. We want it to overpower as often as possible so that we can do more damage with the overpowering damage bonus. Right. So that's it in terms of skills, aspects, and powers. Next, we are going to be going over the Book of the Dead. So, as I said before, we have no minions in this build, so all of our minions are going to be sacrificed. And for these sacrifices, we are going for the standard stuff that all Bone Spear oriented builds go for. In terms of skeletons, we sacrifice skeletal skirmishers, and that's going to increase our critical strike chance by 5%, so more critical strikes, which is very good because ideally we want to take advantage of the critical strike damage bonus plus overpower damage bonus effect as often as possible. Then for the mages, we are going to be sacrificing the bone skeletal mages, and that is going to give us 25% more overpower damage. So that's going to do a lot for our overpower damage bonus. And then in terms of the golem, you can either go for the blood golem, which gives you 10% more life. That helps your survivability, obviously, and it also gives you 10% more overpower damage. But I've decided to go for the iron golem sacrifice because that gives me 30% increased critical strike damage. So basically more damage at the cost of less survivability. But I think either one of these is good. Here, just, take your pick. So that's it for the Book of the Dead. Next, we are going to be talking about the Paragon board. So the first board, what I've done here is I've of course, like always, started off from the right side and then taken all of these damage bonus nodes here, and I've also taken this additional 2% maximum life node, which is important because we are using overpower, and overpower, the way overpower works is basically the more life you have, the more damage you do with overpowering attacks. So this is both going to be boosting our survivability and our damage. And for the same reason, I've decided to go for these two nodes down here. So 2% maximum life and 4% maximum life. That's going to be an additional 6% damage that we're doing with overpowering attacks. And, you know, the survivability and the all-res here is also very good. In terms of glyphs, I didn't really have the capacity to fill out the nodes in the range of this glyph, so I wanted to go for something simple that doesn't require a lot of nodes here, so I went for Gravekeeper. Although we are going to be consuming a lot of corpses with Bone Storm, then just because of the sheer amount of enemies that are going to be dying around us, there's still going to be a lot of corpses left. So if you want, you can just fill out those nodes up to 25 dexterity, and that's going to give you 2% increased damage for every close corpse, so more damage. But more importantly, it gives me, I haven't upgraded it fully, but at this point it already gives me 95% bonus to all rare nodes within range. So the node that I want is this one. So that basically gives me 90% more damage just for having this node in this socket, which is always good. So I've taken all the damage nodes here and then moved on to the first attached board, which is going to be, of course, Bone Graft. If you're playing Bone Spear, Bone Graft, you know about this board for sure. It's kind of an auto-include for bone builds in general. But what I really want to talk about here is, of course, the legendary node is amazing. No doubt about it, you need that in your build. But what's maybe a little bit overlooked here is it actually has the biggest life bonus from all of the Paragon boards. Is right here on this board. 8% maximum life from the rare node, and then another 4%, 6% maximum life from these little magical nodes here. So that gives you 14% maximum life in total, which is very nice. So for a build that both critically strikes and overpowers, you definitely want this because it's not only going to give you 16% more damage, it's also going to boost your survivability greatly. And then all of these other things like are kind of straightforward. Critical strike chance with bone skills, critical strike damage with bone skills, you know, maximum essence on kill. So you probably also know about those if you've ever done a bone spear build. Again, critical strike damage with bone, critical strike damage with bone and bone skill damage. Bone skill damage. Here I've taken these all-res nodes just because as we're going to be talking about in the stats section, I don't have 4 resistances. So every bit of resistance helps, and basically 6, 7.5, 9% all-res for 3 Paragon nodes. That's pretty cheap. So I decided to go for that. And then for the glyph socket, I actually went for essence. So what this gives me is it basically gives me 200% critical strike damage, which is exactly what I want in a build that is going to take advantage of both the critical strike damage bonus and the overpower damage bonus. So this you need this glyph in this build. It's basically auto-include. Right, so after taking all of that, I've moved over to the second board that I'm going to be attaching, and that is Bloodbath. So deal 35 increased overpower damage. You definitely need that for the build that is going to be overpowering as often as possible. And the other nodes that I've decided to go for here is damage while healthy and overpower damage. So that's basically auto include. Here, all these guys are either damage while healthy or overpower damage. So that's a pretty big bonus to overpower damage. And then for the glyph socket, I decided to go for exploit here. And the reason why I went for exploit is I'm going to be doing all of the enemies hit with Bone Spear vulnerable, as we talked about in the skills, aspects, and powers section. And since I'm going to be doing that, then might as well do 71.8% more damage to them. Since I'm and this is really also really great for bosses, because for example, if you have glyphs like control that make you do more damage to crowd control enemies, that's not going to be very good for bosses, because bosses are only crowd controlled when they are knocked down. On the other hand, you can make a boss vulnerable all of the time, which is what I'm going to be doing, because I'm going to be hitting them with Bone Spear a lot. So vulnerable damage, this one is also kind of auto include here. And here I've taken the damage while fortified buff, just because I need those two dexterity nodes so that I can be doing more vulnerable damage. Moving on to the fourth board that I've attached. This board is Blood Begets Blood. And here the only things that I need is the glyph socket and this node here, because this is the biggest bonus to overpower damage from all of the Paragon boards. So I'm definitely going to be needing this one. And as you see, I've done a little bit of a trick here, where I've only taken the glyph socket from this side and then approached this section here from the other side through the fourth Paragon board that I've attached. And this is because I didn't really want to spend any nodes in these things here, because I'm not going to be using them all that much. Blood orbs, well, yeah, this is nice, but I'm not going to be using blood orbs because I simply don't have neither the skills or the aspects to enable blood orb generation, and I don't have any free slot to put them in. So for the glyph here, I have of course went for the other auto-include glyph for this build, that's Dominate. And what this does, it gives me 427% overpower damage. So that's a lot of overpower damage more that you're going to be doing. So you definitely need this glyph in this build. And the reason why I've put it here is because this particular board has a lot of willpower nodes around this glyph. So it's kind of optimal to put it here to max out the overpower damage bonus from this glyph. Other than that, overpower damage here, overpower damage here. There's a third one here also. So 10% damage after picking up a blood orb. I don't really need that, but I just need this node to get here. So that's kind of that's kind of a necessity to take this one. And then the fourth board that I'm going to be attaching is Scent of Death. And here I haven't gone for the legendary node nor for the glyph socket, just because I don't have the Paragon nodes to be able to do that. What I did go for here is I just wanted to reach this section here as quick as possible, while hopefully taking some useful buffs along the way. And this board just so happens to have some useful buffs along the way, which is 2% maximum life, 4% maximum life for the cost of 2 nodes, so that's pretty cheap. And here you also have 7.5 crit strike damage, 7.5, 7.5, and here you have 15 crit strike damage. And that basically allows me to spend the rest of my Paragon nodes to go here and take all of these 5% damage and 22.5 overpower damage nodes, which are going to be doing a lot for my build. And you might be thinking, well, but shouldn't you have done this differently? You don't have the bonus here, which is another 45% more overpower damage. And well, yes, maybe you could do something to make this work, but what I've done instead is I also happen to have, I'm lucky to have Grandfather. So notice that now this bonus is inactive because I don't have enough intelligence, but Grandfather happens to have 108 ult stats. So when I equip Grandfather, then all of a sudden this bonus is going to be active, which is very good for bosses. And for just regular enemies, you're doing enough damage anyway. Of course, it would be nice to have this bonus, but you don't really need it all that much. And yeah, also this critical strike damage bonus also becomes active when you equip Grandfather. So we are going to be coming back to this in a second. But for now, that's it for the Paragon board. Next, we are going to be going over the stats. So in terms of stats, as you see, 1400 attack power, 5,500 armor, and 1800 life. 1800 life makes for very good survivability already. This could have been more. I could have taken some more maximum life nodes, but then the damage wouldn't be as optimal, as maxed out as it could be. So I decided to go for the damage with this build. And notice that when I equip Grandfather, which is what I'm going to be doing for a boss fight, then my attack power goes up to 2200, so 22,000, sorry, and then my life also drops down to, goes up actually to 21,000. So that's also going to be a good thing for boss fights. Right. In terms of other stats, 5,500 intelligence, 441 willpower, 429 dexterity. The resistances are not the best. As you can see, I only have fire res and poison res max out, but poison res is particularly important because there are enemies that are doing a lot of poison damage, and you know, it can happen in the end game where basically the entire floor is going to be covered with poison. So you want to be able to not die from that, and poison resistance is very important for this matter. The other ones, as I said, they could be better, but then I would have to sacrifice some damage to be able to max them out. So I decided to not do that for this build just yet. Then 3,300 weapon damage with Grandfather. That goes up to 4,000 at something. What's next? 1 second. Critical strike damage 700% more, and then another 100 with bone scales, and then the overpower damage is 3,276%, so over 3,000% overpower damage. That's going to be the kind of burst damage that I'm going to be doing. Every time I overpower, I'm just going to be doing millions of damage, which is particularly good against bosses, and even more with Grandfather. Vulnerable damage 135. In terms of defensive stats, block reduction 60% because I have the shield, block chance 20%, that also helps your survivability a lot, and damage reduction from close almost 20%. 4% dodge chance, that's kind of standard. Maximum essence 169, that's already a lot. You could boost this further by going for sacrificing the skeletal mages in Book of the Dead, but I don't really want that. I prefer the 25% overpower damage, because the 15 additional essence is going to give me only 15% more damage when I am at max essence. On the other hand, here you get 25%, so 10% more damage, and every time you overpower, so independent on how much essence you have. And what else? Anything relevant here? Not really. Movement speed 144. We're going to be talking about that in a second when we are going to be going over the gear. So yeah. Then as for the gear, as I already mentioned, for some of these things in these skills, the main event for this build is the Banished Lord's Talisman, which is going to make our core skills. So in this case, Bone Spear overpower, and also it's going to make the critical strikes that overpower deal above 100 more damage, which is very good. That's kind of what we want, because we are going to be both critically striking and overpowering a lot with this build. Apart from that, it also gives you crit chance, which is great, overpower damage, which is great, resource generation, which is really great, and plus 2 ranks to our core skills, which I don't mind at all as well. Next, Deathless Visage, that's the helmet. That's going to make Bone Spear leave behind echoes that are just going to be doing some chip damage to a lot of enemies at the same time, which is always good. Then 28% critical strike damage with bone skills, excellent. 23.3 physical damage. Bone skills are all physical damage by default, so that further enhances our bone skills. Bone splinters, bone spear, bone storm, what have you. Then 18 maximum essence. That's apart from maximum essence, that's also 18% more damage because of the ossified essence key passive that we have, and 5.5% damage reduction. That always helps. Then the armor, 18.8% physical damage, so that's going to be boosting our damage with Bone Spear, Bone Splinters, and Bone Storm. Then 26.2% bone skill damage, same thing. 1,310 maximum life. So that's also going to be boosting not only our survivability, but also our damage with overpower. And then damage reduction from close, that one's pretty straightforward. And also notice that I've put rubies in all of the armor pieces, just to have 4% maximum life, because when you overpower, you're both going to get a survivability boost and a damage boost from those rubies. And the weapons, the shield also has a ruby, because the shield is actually a piece of armor, so that's also going to be boosting both your maximum life and 4% damage with overpowering attacks. And the weapon, here I've also put a ruby, that's just because that's 24% more overpower damage. Same with Grandfather. So yeah, that's for the gems. Next, gloves. 15% attack speed. That's always very important, to be attacking as much as possible, because then we're doing more damage, we're spending more essence, which is going to make us overpower more often, which again is going to do make us do even more damage. Critical strike chance against injured enemies, well, that one could have been better. Maybe it could have been something like overpower damage or something. Maybe I'll find a better piece of gloves that have overpower instead of this one day. Next, lucky hit. Up to a 5% chance to restore for 15% primary resource. This one's very important for our resource generation, because we want to be spending as much resource as possible because of the way Banished Lord works. So we also want to be regenerating as much resource as possible, as much essence as possible, to be able to spend yet again more essence. And then 4 ranks to Bone Spear, well, that one's pretty straightforward. For the trousers, I've selected Blood Moon Breeches, mainly because of the unique ability that these trousers have. And at first, this is kind of counterintuitive, because what you see first is this thing that is on the top here. Your minions have a 5% chance to curse enemies, but I don't have any minions, right? So how is this relevant? Well, actually it's super relevant because of the other thing that those trousers do, and that is enemies affected by at least one of your curses take 70% increased overpower damage from you. So the curse doesn't have to be applied by your minions. You can apply it yourself. That's why I have both Decrepify and Iron Maiden equipped, and that's why I'm spamming these skills all the time, to be able to benefit from this 70% overpower damage bonus, which is a massive bonus. I think it's the second biggest bonus to overpower after this glyph here, which gives you with the bonus gives you 90% overpower damage. So yeah, these trousers are really important. Just remember that you have to be cursing enemies left, right, and center to be able to use them. And also this gives you +3 ranks to all curse skills, which is good, right? More damage, chip damage from Iron Maiden, more slow and damage reductions from the Decrepify, excellent. 2 ranks to amplify damage, yet again more damage, excellent. 12% damage reduction from enemies affected by curses, again excellent. And maximum life, so yet again more survivability, more damage, exactly what you want. Then for the boots are pretty interesting, because I really needed boots that have as much movement speed boosts as possible, and this is because I can't benefit from the movement speed buff in the amulet. The amulet I'm wearing is Banished Lord's Talisman, which is unique, right? And it's kind of the centerpiece of this build, but it doesn't have a movement speed bonus. And that made my character be really slow. So in order to circumvent this, I've taken boots that have 3 separate movement speed bonuses. They have a movement speed bonus, which is of course something that you need in every good pair of boots, but they also have an additional 21% movement speed for 4 seconds after killing an elite. And the aspect is one of the new aspects for Season 2, where you gain 20% movement speed and lose this bonus whenever you take damage. And since I'm playing a ranged character, then I'm not going to be taking damage so often. So this is an excellent way to get a further 20% movement speed. And while the fire resistance and poison resistance, yeah, you basically want resistances for the other 2 affixes for these boots, just so that you can boost these numbers up a little bit, especially poison res. For the weapon, when I'm running through the dungeon, I'm using a sword, because that gives me 26.2% critical strike damage, and then that's a fixed affix for every sword on the top over there, and then the rolled affixes are a further 30% critical strike damage, 74% overpower damage, 24% vulnerable damage, and 23% core skill damage. So it's really hard to go wrong with any of these affixes. It's going to be even harder to find a better sword than this one, really. For the socket, that's a ruby, so a further 24% overpower damage, always good. For the offhand, I'm using Lidless Wall, which, as I talked about previously, is going to be boosting my resource generation, and it's going to be boosting my survivability because of generating multiple bone storms. And aside from that, it basically has the ideal affixes for a bone spear build with overpower. So 14 maximum essence, that's 14% more damage. 806 maximum life, that's more overpower damage. Up to a 5% chance to restore 12% primary resource. That's ideal for your resource generation. And note that I actually have the same aspect in gloves. And the way this works is that the numbers from those two are not going to stack, but instead they are going to be rolled separately. So each time you lucky hit, you're going to roll for a 5% chance to restore your primary resource from the shield, and then another roll and a 5% chance to restore your primary resource from the gloves. So that's really good. And 10% attack speed. Again, hard to go wrong with that. You want to be attacking as much as possible to be doing as much damage as possible. And then the rings. So first ring, all res of course, and light res for the resistances, and then critical strike damage, overpower damage, physical damage, and resource generation. Again, it's going to be hard to find a better ring than this one, maybe with better rolls. And then the second ring, again, overpower damage, physical damage, maximum life, and resource generation. So all of these, basically all of these benefit, in both of the rings, all of the affixes benefit my damage in some way. Right. So that's it for the gear. Next, we are going to be going over the gameplay. So, what is it that I do when I play with this character? And to do that, we are actually be going over to the training grounds here. So, when you're running through a dungeon, you don't want to be using Grandfather. You want to be using a sword and the lidless wall to get the constant resource generation and the constant survivability from the bone storms, which really benefit from the fact that there are a lot of enemies in the dungeon that you're going to be running through. So let's just set up the training dummies here. Yes, multiple, please. Right. So what you want to do when you enter a dungeon and you encounter the first group of enemies is you want to fire Bone Storm, hit them with the Decrepify, and then just spam Bone Spear. And what this is going to do is the Decrepify is going to cause them to take more overpower damage, and Lidless Wall is going to spawn the additional Bone Storms on them, as you can see. And then in the event when you run out of essence while spamming Bone Spear, just hit them with Iron Maiden, and then usually groups of enemies will be larger than this, so that's going to, as you see, recover some essence, and then just continue spamming Bone Spear. And if actually both of these methods fail, you don't have a lot of enemies, like so. You don't have a lot of enemies to regenerate your essence with Iron Maiden, then just fall back to Bone Splinters to regenerate your essence. You want to get up close here, and then once you regenerate, just continue spamming Bone Spear. And remember to always curse them with either the Decrepify or Iron Maiden, so that you can benefit from the additional overpower damage bonus in Blood Moon Breaches. When you do eventually encounter a boss, like so, let's get rid of this here. When you do eventually encounter a boss, like so, you want to either just continue like this if you don't have Grandfather, or equip Grandfather if you are lucky enough to have it. And then what you want to do is you want to do the most damage, as much damage as possible to the boss up front, right? And actually you're going to be doing the most damage when you have full essence and when you have full HP. So full HP, well, that's kind of obvious because of the overpower damage bonus, but full essence is also very important because Ossivite Essence is going to have the most benefit when you are at full essence, and then the additional aspect is also going to give you the most benefit when you are at full essence. So full essence means the most critical strike damage bonus and the most damage bonus that you can do. So what you want to do when you enter the boss room is you want to hit them with Iron Maiden, first of all, because Iron Maiden costs no essence because of the enhanced Iron Maiden that we have here, right? So that's not going to make you spend essence, and it's not going to reduce your damage. So just hit him with fire up Bone Storm, hit him with Iron Maiden, and then spam Bone Spear. Like this. Once you run out, hit him with Bone Splinters, get up close so that you can hit all the Bone Splinters, Iron Maiden, and spam Bone Spear. And rinse and repeat. Bone Splinters until you get up to max. Then, when you're at max, Iron Maiden, Bone Spear. Like so. So, yeah, that's it in terms of gameplay. And then when you leave the boss room and you enter the next dungeon, just switch over to the normal sword and shield so that you can be more survivable, and also you can generate more essence without the necessity to use Bone Splinters. Right. So, maybe one possible modification that you can do to this build is to further boost your essence regeneration to be able to run around with Grandfather all of the time. Maybe do something like go for old skeletal mages where they gain 2 essence with their normal attack or something like that, or maybe replace 2 of the aspects that I have here with, for example, the aspect that makes your consuming corpses generate blood orbs, and then another aspect that makes the blood orbs regenerate essence. So maybe that is something that you could do. But what I decided to go for is just for this weapon swap here. When entering the boss room, it's also very important, if you do this, it's very important to mark the weapons as favorite, like so, so that you don't accidentally sell or burn them at the blacksmith. When they're favorite, they cannot be removed from your inventory in any way. Right. And then also briefly going over, last but not least, briefly going over the weak points of this build. So obviously one weak point is this weapon swap thing, right? You can, sometimes you can forget to swap out the weapons, sometimes you can maybe leave the Grandfather in your stash or something like that, or just enter the dungeon with Grandfather equipped and die because you don't have as much survivability or essence regeneration as you would like to. So that's maybe one weak point. I really wish Blizzard would make a kind of 2 custom weapon loadouts in the same way that Diablo 2 used to have, where you could just swap between Grandfather and these 2 weapons. But then again, well, that's kind of the Barbarian special mechanic. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but it would be just cool for all of the characters to be able to benefit from this, at least to a degree. And then the other weak point, also as I mentioned earlier, is speed. This is not the fastest character in the world, so you will have to be kind of a little bit patient when running through dungeons. It's not also the slowest character in the world. It runs around very quickly, as you can see, but just for the reason that you can't benefit from the movement speed boost from the talisman, and you can't also benefit from Reaper's Pursuit because you're not doing any shadow damage. Make this build significantly slower than some of the other builds that I've already done, and also put on YouTube, so feel free to check out my channel for those if you want to. And yeah, that's kind of it. Also, what I want to just briefly touch on in the end is a lot of my clanmates or friends tell me, well, why don't you just make a planner for this build online instead of doing a full YouTube video? And yeah, maybe I will do a planner for this. If I ever do that, it's going to be included in the video's description. But the reason I'm doing this is that in the video you can not only show what gear, what skills, and what Paragon nodes you have, but you are also able to explain why you are doing this. And this is very important for people who not only want to just copy the build and have everything exactly as I have here, but who want to do some alterations or maybe do their own build that only uses part of what I have here. So for those people, it's going to be very important to understand not only why I have the Paragon nodes, why I have the skills, but also why I have those particular skills and Paragon nodes and gear. So yeah, that's it for today. Please like and subscribe if you like this build. If you want to see this build take down Uber Lilith, feel free to go to my channel, and also the video link is going to be included in the description. And have a nice day.